Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Ruth Ezel. As part of the Luminary Arts Counterpublic exhibit, local artists are animating the everyday spaces of Cherokee Street. It's a triennial exhibition that's scaled to a neighborhood with expansive artist commissions, performances, and processions, and more, all through July 13th. While the exhibit itself is only around for a couple of months, participants including our local artists José, Guadalupe, Garza, and Miriam, Ruiz have created a permanent art intervention in El Chico Bakery, a family-owned and operated Mexican bakery on Cherokee Street. Now, for Counterpublic, José and Miriam added a small Spanish language library in El Chico to help remedy what they describe as a lack of access to Latinx literature for the rapidly growing Latinx populations in St. Louis. In addition to working on this project together, the two are part of the team at the Contemporary Art Museum. And they join me now in studio alongside the Luminaries' Katherine Simóne Reynolds, who was one of the curators for the Counterpublic exhibition. So José, Miriam, Katherine, welcome to the program. Now, for those of us who are not familiar with the term Latinx, could you please define it for me, Miriam?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically the term would be Latinos. The X is a way of making the language just more inclusive. For those of you who have taken Spanish, you know that you can have a group of women who would be Latinas, and it takes the addition of one male, and it's suddenly a group of Latinos. So that's kind of a corrective intervention to sort of neutralize the language a little bit. And then, of course, Latinx also opens the language up to include people who do not identify as one or the other gender.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about your installation. I went by El Chico yesterday, and of course, well, you can't just pass by the pastry case. So I got some pastry, and then I made a left, and I looked at your installation and the books. Terrific idea. And the first impression I got, just as seeing it for the first time, was that those books managed to transform what might be just a casual eating space with a real community gathering space. And I didn't know if that was part of your intention to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that drew us to the space in the first place is we had been there a few times before for the exact same reason, for the pastries, but also we had had meetings there, and we had had an opportunity to speak with members of the family and their interest in creating a space where it's more of a community hub, a gathering space. So that was an interest of the owners. And then our choices as far as the library, also adding the AV cart so that we could do screenings there, was this idea of how can we make this space, how can it transcend just being a place of transaction just for pastries, but a place where people can rest and sit and think and kind of interact with other members of the community.
Okay. José, I noticed before going in that there's a monitor that was outside. It looked like a colorized image like from an old movie. What is that?
That's correct. So our project at El Chico Bakery is called Ojalá, which in Spanish translates to hopefully. And it has three components. So there's the library, there's the AV cart, and then there's the monitor outside. So the monitor outside is showing a scene from a movie called Tizoc that starred the actress Maria Felix and the actor Pedro Infante, both from the golden age of Mexican cinema. That's a movie that Miriam and I saw together. We screened it, and it's a movie about an indigenous man that falls in love with a mestiza woman. So a woman that is born in Mexico but still identifies as European, or like not very far European descent. So it's kind of a Romeo and Juliet movie. It's problematic for its time. It's like, I think it was made in 1952. But it also talks about a lot of like also current ways in which we talk about identity, lack of representation, othering, and maybe how sometimes cultures that we're not familiar with, we kind of tend to treat them as inferior to us. You know, maybe not everybody does that, but I think that still comes up. You know, we other the unknown.
Okay, so all those components are permanent in El Chico?
No, so they are there through the length of the exhibition.
Okay.
I think they're actually not meant to be permanent. I think there was an intention where that could occur.
Well, certainly with the library, it looks like
Right.
it could.
So the reason why it's not necessarily permanent yet is because we also designed the library and the AV card to be mobile because it is a business and they do host other events. So we haven't really decided whether it's going to reside there permanently or not. I think we wouldn't have any issue with that, but it's also left up to El Chico.
All right.
Yeah, but that's we're hoping that we can maybe talk them into it. But also, it's on wheels, so we can kind of cart it around different parts of the city too. And we've talked about how that could be a possibility. You know, how this maybe somebody can come upon it like at a different location.
So this is one of just many installations that are all across the neighborhood. So, Katherine, I want to ask you, what was the Luminaries process in developing the exhibition? What are its origins?
So essentially, like thinking about just counterpublics and actually what a counterpublic is. So really, a counterpublic is looking at a subversive like group, a group on the outside. So a group that is not necessarily looked at as the social norm or the norm and whatever that even really means, but creating spaces that these groups can actually talk about like the dissonance and also the disconnect between each other and as well as amongst the whole entire rest of the world. So really understanding what that means and trying to just articulate that and also show that to people that aren't necessarily like from Cherokee Street or artists and like really like who can be in what spaces and who feels comfortable in what spaces and why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to invite listeners to join the conversation. If you have any comment or question for our guest about the exhibition Counterpublic, the Luminary, which is staging it, or the work of the artists involved, please give us a call. 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL On Air or email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. Now, for listeners who aren't that familiar with the Luminary, it's an arts incubator, founded, of course, more than a decade ago. Within a fairly short period of time, it's really become a force to be reckoned with in terms of the artists that it attracts from across the country and actually around the world. So, Katherine, if you can just expand on just how influential the Luminary has become.
I mean, I think that for me, like being new to the team, but also like understanding the space, like the institution in the neighborhood, and like understanding that me working in the space is, me working in the neighborhood is a privilege. Like not necessarily just working at the Luminary, but like working in the neighborhood is a privilege for me. Being able to work in a space where I'm able to bring in people that I believe can learn a lot from the Cherokee Street neighborhood and learn a lot from, and we can learn from each other. So it's an ongoing dialogue, ongoing conversation. And I think that for the Luminaries' role on the street, it's very complex. It's really, it's difficult at times, but it's like, this is the life that we've decided to live, as well as like the life that we want to continue having through the Luminary. If that kind of goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. José, Miriam, you have collaborated. This isn't your first collaboration. I mean, and you talk to me about that, because I've always been fascinated about how artists can collaborate just because, well, we're kind of like snowflakes, you know. Everybody's got their own individual vision. So I'm very intrigued by how that process of you working together comes together.
A lot of times, opportunities for artists in general can be limiting sometimes, you know, as far as like the amount of opportunities they are. Sometimes it feels like it is a very competitive field, you know, where you're looking for spaces where you can show your work or interact with. For me, collaborating is important because I have had a multi-cultural experience and as a child of immigrants. So art has always been a space for me to share ideas more than kind of learn technique or expertise in some sort of material manipulation. So when Miriam and I started working at the Contemporary Museum, Miriam had already been there for a few months, but I felt like we shared a common history already as being part of a Latinx community, and we had a lot of the same questions. So Miriam is also an artist, but I think maybe she considered herself more of an art historian. That was her like most recent education. So when I had an opportunity, when I was invited for an earlier exhibition, I had talked to her about maybe us collaborating together, because I was interested in this kind of space where it wasn't about a single narrative. I was also, it wasn't just me projecting something that I was like interested in or something that I was trying to identify or work through. I wanted to work with her because we had places where we overlapped and also places where we departed, philosophically, etc. And that's been my experience, like as an American, also. So there's this sense sometimes for artists that what we do is like very insular. It's about our mastery of materials, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like that's not necessarily one of my interests. So collaborating is an essential part of my practice. It's not easy, like you said. Miriam and I do disagree on a lot of things, but it has been one of the most rewarding things I have done, like artistically, is to work with her, because it's opened my eyes to things that I would not consider otherwise. And it's been challenging for me to even figure out my methodology in my studio. Sometimes like we don't have to explain that to anybody. You go into the studio, you make things, and then nobody holds you accountable sometimes. So it's been nice for me to figure out why I choose the materials that I choose, why I research the things that I do, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to articulate that. Not to justify the making, but in my own sense, just like for my own kind of conceptual development.
So Miriam, what kind of things do you guys disagree on?
Oh, crap.
Maybe I should
Put you on the spot. Well, yeah, I couldn't help. Sorry.
So obviously, like José said, I have a research background. So whenever, just one thing is whenever he presents an idea to me, I want to immediately break it down into our game plan and honestly, like what literature we're going to read. So it's not like that in and of itself has been that large a point of disagreement, but our way of approaching things is a little bit different. And I think we both, kind of like José already alluded to, is the fact that we're not used necessarily to always having to very explicitly articulate where we're coming from, what we're thinking about, the way we're approaching things. And when you're working in a collaboration, someone is holding you accountable, and then you do. And then you get frustrated when you can't articulate it, and they get really frustrated when they have no idea what you're talking about. So I would say communications is probably the foundational thing we disagree over.
Okay. Well, we need to take a quick break, but we're going to be back in just a moment. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome back. We now return to our conversation with artists José Guadalupe Garza and Miriam Ruiz, and from the Luminary, curator Katherine Simóne Reynolds. So, Katherine, what kind of other projects can you describe for us taking place in Counterpublic?
There's a couple of programming that's coming up, actually. So there's going to be a barbecue cookout on Love Bank on May 25th. That's a part of a sound sculptural piece by Matt Joint, as well as Josh. Hold on, sorry. 1 second. Let me just get my notes. Apologize.
Technology is a wonderful thing,
know, right?
isn't it?
Right. Matt Joint, Josh Rios, as well as Anthony Romero. So it's a part of the Pinata sound system. So essentially talking about, so the piece is actually called Not Peace and Quiet. And so it's really discussing like who gets to make noise and like who thinks about noise as being something that is a bad thing as well as something that is illegal, but also thinking about it as a way of protest, as a way of actually being able to be vocal in your neighborhood. So like being able to be on Love Bank, having a barbecue or cookout, and also having these bikes, these old OFO bikes, like as everybody knows that they left St. Louis, and so if you see someone actually riding them, then that means that they actually own this bike. And so now, like being able to decorate these bikes and to make them into these sculptural sound systems, these sound pieces for people to make noise and to be loud and to be vocal, to be seen in their neighborhood. like to rent these bikes out and to ride them around Cherokee Street is a way of protest, as well as just like being able to be seen once again. Yeah. As opposed to like being erased and not being able to be to say things that you need to say to whomever. Yeah.
Well, subversiveness in art seems to be getting more and more attention just because of our current political climate. So how important do you feel the role is of the subversive artist?
Is that for everybody?
That is for anybody. Jose, I think I'd like to start with you.
So I think this kind of goes along with the library. So I grew up reading books like Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, Animal Farm, where they were describing these conditions that are dystopic. But I remember thinking, I'm like, these things are kind of happening in my community already. So sometimes, I think we can kind of suffer from, a historical amnesia. That's not, a thing that I'm coining. There's other artists that kind of use that as a jumping off point for their work. But maybe they're cyclical, but it's important for us not to forget them. So we use art as one way to kind of preserve a narrative. Literature does the same way too. And I think for us, when I was in my early arts education, nobody told me that I couldn't make art about being a Latino. But it was implied somehow. I was telling myself that I couldn't do that because other art that I was being shown or that I was studying did not include voices like mine. So even when we're making work, our identity or our experience does come up because we're constantly being asked to address it. So I think the subversiveness is important in art, different forms, because histories change, histories are manipulated, histories are erased, and art is a way to kind of preserve those histories as well. Miriam and I talk about the Trojan horse. That's how art behaves sometimes. Maybe you see an intriguing object or something compelling, and it draws you in, and then maybe there's many other layers of meaning that kind of uncover maybe different conditions. I also don't think that art necessarily fixes social conditions or problems, but it does give them a voice, like Katherine was saying, and it does give us a platform. So art has allowed me to be here on the radio and to talk about those things.
And also just to talk about real quick, with y'all's project, understanding that these things do change, even if it is something that is permanent, it's still about understanding someone's life, understanding what life really looks like. And I think that sometimes in the art world, it becomes this very surface thing that everybody just assumes that everything's going okay and everything's fine and that nothing can really change. And there's deadlines, there's all these concrete things. And so understanding that regular life, real life is not about anything being held down. So really understanding that we can have mobility, actual mobility, and understanding that, if this is in the way, then you can actually move it because we respect your time or your space. So seeing that y'all are using the cart that can actually be is mobile, because you understand that people have to work, understanding the socioeconomics and understanding that just because I have a project or an installation does not necessarily equate to you having to deal with it. Once again, it is a privilege for me to do what I do. It's a privilege for me to be able to speak to store owners and speak to artists and making sure that everything is okay, and understanding it in this way of just because we are artists or just because we're doing what we're doing does not necessarily mean that we know everything or that we can see things in this whole other way. No, this is a regular thing. And I think understanding the regularity of that is sometimes it's really difficult, and the Trojan horse is is a really beautiful way of saying that, because I think that we get really caught up with just the aesthetic and not necessarily understanding the depth and the real life within it.
Looking at that integration, that intersection between art and community, the Luminary's done something that I don't think a lot of other arts institutions have done. If you look at demographics, and when you see art galleries or other art institutions move into a neighborhood, sooner or later gentrification follows. What I've noticed over the past 10 years is that the Luminaries actually made Cherokee more Cherokee. That it is staying true to its own personality. Now, I didn't know if that was a goal of the Luminary. It sounds like perhaps it has been.
I don't know if that's possible for like I don't know if it's possible for a space to necessarily make a neighborhood more themselves. I think it's more so of us understanding it more, and then being able to speak to all the people that live on the street, speak to all the people that go to, like, I go to B-side a lot. Like, it's like, just because I like to go to this bar, like, and also because I've, grown up like from 21, I wasn't a child in the bar, like, no, from 21 till now, like Cherokee Street has been a very much so a part of my life, and like through a lot of growth. And I think that with the Luminary, understanding that growth is not necessarily, it's not linear, of course. And so also understanding that Cherokee Street is not linear, like it is actually physically that way, but mentally there's a lot of like hurdles to have to go over, and like understanding that a role of any art institution on any street, especially in a space like Cherokee, like this presence means something, whether it's good or bad, it means something. And to have open dialogue and conversation about things, like understanding that, yes, gentrification is a very real thing, and to understand that we have to have a conversation about this, but like not necessarily through a program. Like you can have a regular conversation with someone on the street about this as well. It does not necessarily have to be programmed into a schedule, because this is an ongoing thing. And it's something that I do think about quite often as being a Black person on staff. Like, how does this look as me, like, being a Black person on staff, a person of color, a queer woman, like, doing these things and, like, making sure that my voice is heard, but also that I'm quiet.
Okay. Now, as you said, Counterpublic is every 3 years. Does it take that long to curate it? I mean, will the process after July 13th, when this closes, does the process for the next
I
one
hope
start?
so. I hope it starts right away. No, I hope so. I mean, for my own mental health, like I really needed to start like right away, because no, it's a lot. It's a lot that goes into it, because we do care. As a caretaker, it's like, but also just as a caring person and as an artist, I would like to know when things are happening. Like if I was on the other end of this, like I would like to know 3 years in advance that like I was going to be doing a major project, just to make sure that like I'm doing what I need to do to the fullest extent, and like to the fullest extent of my ability. And so I think that on admin side, as well as on install side, as well as like there's so many layers of just like installing one thing, unless you do work with Miriam as well as José, who are like, we're super independent, we can do this, and we're local, and we can like unless it's like that. But there's a lot of, we worked with over 30 artists. It's like it's a lot that goes into planning this, and 3 years would be super lovely. Yes.
And when you say 30 artists, we're not talking just 30 artists from around town. We're talking from around the world.
Yeah. Yes, because Isabel Lewis, who has she has her performance or performative installation called An Occasion, that's on June 1st, and she's based in Berlin. So like bringing her out, as well as like Candace Williams, is like there's a lot of people that are coming in for this, as well as like press and things like that. So understanding how to just balance scheduling and like calendars, and so just making sure that everybody is cared for throughout this, and like there's not anyone that's like falling through the cracks just because we're exhausted. Like that's not really an excuse. Yeah.
The final day of Counterpublic, there's it looked like a performance from what I could see of the still photographs. Could you describe that, and who's going to be doing that?
So that's Nikkei. They are coming on July 13th, which is the closing of Counterpublic, and essentially they'll be doing a procession throughout the neighborhood of walking, but also still movements throughout the neighborhood, like discussing really not necessarily exhaustion, but exertion of like the Black body within space. So it's I've seen like videos of this, and I'm really excited that they'll be coming to like really because performance, especially performance on the Black body throughout a neighborhood, where it's not necessarily, safety is not necessarily like the main thing. It's about just like everyone being together and seeing this Black body like moving very slowly and very like exhaustively through an area.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to wrap up by circling back to El Chico. I was wondering, Miriam, can you explain to me why the community believes it's so special, such a special place?
Well, El Chico is a panaderia, and for Latino communities, a panaderia is where we get bread and our treats, and we get treats that we aren't able to get in a lot of other places. Part of the reason that we chose El Chico is because of the central role that a panaderia plays in a community versus like a restaurant or, a discotheque or something like this. They cater to pretty much anybody that likes Mexican food or likes Latino music. People outside of the Latino community typically are not seeking out pan dulce or conchas or anything like this. That's specifically for, or more often than not, for people that grew up eating those things. So that's part of the reason we wanted to place something so unexpected there, a place where you can read literature that it's a little bit more difficult to find unless you know where to find it in a library, screening movies that you may not have heard about, even for the Latino community they may not have heard about. So that was a central tenet of this project, was doing something very unexpected that would transform the space.
Are the books in both Spanish and English, or just...
And Portuguese.
And Portuguese, oh yeah.
So this isn't, while we do call it a Latinx neighborhood library, this isn't just for Latinos. I mean, the idea is that anybody who comes into El Chico Bakery has an opportunity to discover a body of literature and art and media that maybe they were previously unaware of. And our ultimate hope is that everyone realizes this is a shared history. This is not Latino history, Latino art, but anything like this is a shared continent and shared country history. And just because it is not included in the mainstream canon does not mean that it is separate and othered, but it is all our history.
Another one of the impressions that I got walking in and looking at those books, I thought I'd really like to contribute a few. Can we? Can the public do that if they want to?
Absolutely. I mean, we want this to be a collaborative. I mean, we're all about collaborating. And actually, we are going to be holding a book drive on June 1st in front of El Chico Bakery from noon to 3 p.m. So please, if you have any literature that you want to give us, stop by. You can meet José and I. We would love to talk to whoever, and give us your books.
Okay, books of any genre for any age group?
Absolutely. What's included in the library shelves, I mean, we have health books, we have history books. We do have a lot of fiction at this point, but I mean, it can go any direction.
Wonderful. Miriam Ruiz, José Guadalupe Garza, and Katherine Simóne Reynolds, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.